The cellar's where I'm hiding when it comes. The scratching starts around midnight. Metallic. That's what gets me. It don't sound like claws. Sounds like brass learning how to want. The door's oak, solid, but I can see where the finish is coming away in strips. Like something's methodical about it. Patient. I know what's on the other side. I've seen it in that violet light. I've watched it, watching me. I reckon you want the story. Well, settle yourself. This ain't gonna be quick, but it's gotta be told. My name don't matter much no more. Folks around Shady Creek call me the surveyor. Spent 42 years walking these mountains with theodolite and chains, measuring what couldn't rightly be measured. The Appalachian range, she's got her own cartography, her own way of keeping secrets. Shady Creek itself ain't much. Just a holler between two ridges where the sun don't spend much time. The creek only runs heavy after rain. Folks who tried farming that soil back in the day, they didn't stay long. Said it felt conscious, aware, like something was watching from underneath. These mountains have got stories, old stories, the kind that don't get wrote down official-like. Stories about 1890. Stories about settlers who came thinking they'd found paradise, then found something else entirely. Stories about what they did to keep it contained. The smell of coming rain in these mountains is distinct, heavy, mineral-like, iron and stone and something else. Something that smells like a root cellar sealed 100 years, where the darkness got thick enough to have a smell. That's what the air was like the day I went to Shady Creek proper. That's what it smelled like when I found the lantern. It had been dry 3 weeks. The creek bed was exposed like a wound. Chalk-white stones and cracked mud arranged in patterns that looked almost intentional. I was looking for old surveying markers, brass plates, stones, testimony to man's arrogance in measuring infinity. I found something else that day. It was wedged between 2 stones 40 feet down the creek bed, in the spot where spring thaw water would gather. The brass was tarnished black in places, but even with all that oxidation, I could tell it was quality work, old work, the kind of craftsmanship that takes time and intention and purpose you believe in completely. It was a lantern. Not like any general store lantern. Traditional, 4-sided with glass panels on all sides. The brass frame was worked with designs that made no sense to me. Geometrical, intentional. Patterns that seemed to follow some logic I couldn't grasp. The kind of designs you might see in old grimoires, if you read such things, which I don't, not usually. The weight surprised me. Heavy, substantial, like it was filled with something more than air and void. When I picked it up with both hands, my forearms felt the strain immediately. This was a thing made to be held with respect. The glass panels were pristine, not a crack, not a smudge, not a single sign of weathering. After however many decades in Shady Creek, exposed to freeze and thaw and the slow work of rust and time, it looked like it had been polished that morning. I picked it up. My hands knew it was wrong, but my curiosity, that old surveyor's need to see, to record, to know, it overrode good sense. I wrapped it in my jacket and carried it home. My house sits a mile up from the holler, high ground. That evening the sky was clearing. Gold and red light from the west made everything look like it was burning from inside. I lit the lantern on the back porch. There wasn't no oil in it, but when I scraped a match against my boot and touched the flame to where the wick should be, something ignited. The flame was violet, not orange, not red, not yellow, not no normal color fire makes in this world. Violet, a cold violet, like the light that comes off deep water when the moon's high, and the water's been cold since before you were born. The flame didn't flicker. It burned steady, patient, like it had been waiting in that lantern for a very long time. The air changed. Not temperature, though my skin felt cold in ways that got nothing to do with wind. It was the weight of the air, like the atmosphere itself had thickened, become dense, become aware of my presence. And when I looked around the porch, the rocking chairs, the rail, the trees beyond, the corners of the world started flickering. That's the only word for it. Flickering. Like someone switching a light on and off real slow. Each time it flickered, the world looked different. Just slightly. Just enough that I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. The next morning, I almost convinced myself it was a dream. But I kept the lantern wrapped in cloth on a shelf in the cellar. And that night, against every instinct, against everything rational, I carried it into the woods toward Shady Creek. The familiar path became something else in the darkness. The violet light turned the green forest into shades of purple and deep blue. The undergrowth became alien. The ferns looked like they had too many fronds. The trees became towers of shadow that seemed to lean inward. It was gradual. That's the important thing to understand. Not a dramatic threshold. Like walking through a door that's always slightly ajar. That's been ajar for 130 years. With each step toward the creek bed, the hinges creaked wider. The barrier between now and then got thinner. The first thing I noticed was the buildings. A settlement in Shady Creek. Not no modern sign of it. No foundations, no chimneys, nothing archaeology could find. But in the violet light, they were there. 3 cabins, log construction, built with care and precision that suggested permanence, impossibility, intention. They looked more real than my own house. The second thing I noticed was the people. They weren't right. They moved too slow, like they were existing in water thicker than normal water, more resistant to motion. Their shapes would flicker at the edges, uncertain, like the light couldn't quite hold them stable. And they were aware of me. I could feel it before I saw it. That moment when their heads turned, all at once, all toward my position, like I was the only thing in their world that mattered. I should have run then, should have hurled that lantern back into the creek and never thought again. But the surveyor in me, the part that needed to understand, to document, to see, that part wanted knowledge. So I walked deeper. The flickering intensified. The world became less stable. One moment I stood in modern forest, trees familiar, ground known. The next I stood in something that had been deliberately kept. The ground was cleared. Trees had been marked with old cuts and arranged in patterns that suggested function, purpose, design, traps. They were traps. I could see the mechanism now, even though no mechanism existed in modern day. Earth dug and shaped into angles. Trees felled in strategic locations. And the light, the violet light, it was showing me what the light had been for. Containment. The 1890 settlers had used light to keep something in place, something that shouldn't move, something that shouldn't leave. And I realized what was strange about the people. They weren't flickering from damage or time's corruption. They were flickering from effort. Like keeping their shape stable in this modern era required constant work. Like they were pushing against a barrier that wanted to scatter them, to disperse them back into whatever realm they'd inhabited. And then the largest one moved toward me. I don't know how to describe what I saw. In the violet light it had something like a shape, but wrong in ways that make your eyes hurt. More angles than a body should have. Proportions shifted depending on viewing angle. When it made a sound, a grinding like rocks in a cement mixer, like continents shifting, like time breaking. I felt it rearrange something fundamental in how my body understood the world. That's when survival instinct overrode curiosity. I turned. I ran. The violet light swung wildly through the forest, showing me both the modern world and that other world, that echo overlap. The two bled into each other like old photographs colliding. And the creatures, there were more now coming from the cabins, they followed, but slowly, like movement in their world was expensive, like they were learning even as they moved, learning the rules of this new world, learning how to want. I made it back to my house, just barely. The porch light was still on from when I'd left. The modern world solidified around me as soon as the violet light stopped being the only light. Like the electric bulb was more real, more insistent, like it had more authority here. But the creatures had followed me out. They stopped at the edge of my property, right where electric light met darkness. In that liminal space, I could see them clearly. The large one with too many angles, the one that had made the sound like breaking time, and several others smaller, more stable, like they were native to this modern era in a way the large one wasn't. They were waiting. I held the lantern in trembling hands. The violet flame burned steady, cold, patient. And in that light, I could see what the creatures were doing. They were learning how to move in this world, learning physics of modern existence, learning how to want things beyond the light, learning desire in a way they hadn't wanted in 130 years. The standoff lasted hours. From midnight until first gray light touched the eastern ridge, I stood on my back porch with that brass lantern and those things, the echo overlap creatures, the hungry things the old settlers had written about in codes and warnings. They stood just beyond the light and learned. They tried moving. They tried shapes. They tried sounds that might convince me to step into darkness, to join them. The smaller ones made noises like children crying from very far away. The large one made sounds like something remembering how to speak after centuries of silence. My legs burned from standing. My arms ached from holding the lantern. The violet flame cast everything in shades of wrong. The grass became deep purple. The porch posts became black towers. The creatures themselves became more defined the longer I watched, as if my observation was teaching them how to be more solid, more real, more here. Then, as gray light became proper dawn, the violet flame began to flicker. Not the world, but the flame itself. It pulsed and guttered like it was running out of fuel, even though there was no fuel. When the flame went out completely, they vanished. Not all at once. They faded. The smaller ones went first, dissolving into darkness like they'd never been real. The large one, the impossible one, it faded last, and I swear I saw it smiling. Smiling like it had learned something it could use. Smiling like it would be back. The lantern felt warm in my hands for the first time. Real warm. Brass sitting in sunshine. I set it down on the porch table, hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped it. I went inside, locked the door, and didn't come out until afternoon. That was 6 years ago. 6 years of sleeping in daylight and staying inside when the sun gets low. 6 years of checking doors and locks and keeping all the lights on. The lantern's still on my back porch table. I haven't moved it. Haven't touched it again. I tried once, 3 months after it happened, to carry it back down to Shady Creek. Made it halfway down the path, and I realized the sun was getting low, and I turned back without finishing. I don't go out after dark no more. Ain't nothing to do at night that can't wait for morning anyway. I got my routines. Wake up with dawn, move around during daylight. When the sun gets low, I'm inside. Doors locked, lights on. All of them. Every single bulb. I keep 'em burning even when it seems wasteful. Even when my electric bill looks like something from a fever dream. Sometimes I wonder if that's what the 1890 settlers did. If they locked themselves inside every night, waiting for morning, knowing the dark was when the hungry things were most likely to remember how to move, how to want, how to reach across the gap between their world and ours. Sometimes I wonder if by lighting that lantern, by showing them the echo overlap was still possible, still functional, if I did something unforgivable. But I'm recording this case file, adding it to the dual archive system where the detailed logs go. Detailed logs that go where this one can't. To the Patreon, to the vaults, to the places where the whole story don't fit into neat video packages meant for the all-night horror playlist. For now, you got the gist of it. Shady Creek's got things in it that shouldn't see light. If you find something that glows violet, you leave it be. You leave leave it in the dark where it belongs. Keep your lights on. Lock your doors. Don't walk in the hollers after sunset. This is the redacted archives. We're still watching, still recording, still finding stories that need telling. The echo overlap's still out there, and I reckon it's still learning.